Psalm 15, one of this morning's psalm selections from the daily lectionary, opens with a searching, penetrating question. Any but the most casual readers will find themselves confronted with a question that will cause a certain amount of soul searching. But then again, sometimes a bit of soul searching is exactly what we need. Hello, I'm Stuart Baskin, pastor of First Presbyterian Church of Tyler, Texas. And this is your daily devotional for Wednesday, August 21st, 2024. O Lord, who may abide in your tent? Who may dwell on your holy hill? That's the question with which Psalm 15 begins. Yes, I know it's two questions, but this is Hebrew poetry. And Hebrew poetry, instead of focusing on rhyming, employs the technique of a two-part sentence, where the second half of the sentence echoes the first. Who may abide in your tent? Who may dwell on your holy hill? Literally two questions, but really in substance, one question. And what a searching question it is. I can never hear it without being caught short. It makes me take stock of who I am. And that's the point. It asks us to take stock of our character, how we act, how we behave, how we treat others. For the psalmist's answer doesn't point to right belief. It points to character. It's one thing to say we believe in God. It's quite another to live as though God really mattered to us. And the answer the psalmist gives is bracing. The psalmist writes, "Those who walk blamelessly and do what is right and speak the truth from their heart, who do not slander with their tongue and do no evil to their friends, nor take up a reproach against their neighbors, in whose eyes the wicked are despised, but who honor those who fear the Lord, who stand by their oath, even to their hurt, who do not lend money and interest, and do not take a bribe against the innocent. Those who do these things shall never be moved." Some years ago, when I lived in Mississippi, I heard a woman say on one of those gray, cold, windy days, she said, "That wind, it just searches you." What she meant was that despite wearing warm clothes and layers, the wind-driven cold found its way past her outer layers, making her shiver. I thought it was a brilliant poetic way to describe that feeling of a cold wind that cuts through the outer layers of sweaters and coats. I like to think Psalm 15 is like that. It searches you. It cuts through the outer layers of protective lies we tell ourselves and exposes us for who we really are. The psalmist's answer begins with three broad generalities, all related to character: walking blamelessly, doing what is right, and speaking the truth from the heart. Whew, we say to ourselves, so far I'm in pretty good shape. But then the psalmist gets very specific, and most of it don't make it through the gauntlet unscathed. Who among us hasn't failed in one of these tests? Be honest. Now, it's important to realize that this isn't some complete list of thou shalt nots that covers the waterfront. They're simply illustrations of something the Old Testament calls righteousness. And by righteousness, it doesn't mean that sort of smug, self-satisfied self-righteousness. Righteousness means always treating others justly, kindly, and with honesty. People who live humbly with God. That familiar verse from Micah 6:8 is as good a definition of righteousness as can be found in the Bible. He has told you, O mortal, what is good, and what does the Lord require of you, but to do justice, and to love kindness, and to walk humbly with your God. Psalm 15 just adds some flesh to these bones. But it is not an encyclopedia of righteousness. It's not a full compendium we can consult for a complete list of right living. It's a sketch, a brief description of what right living looks like in action. It's just a brief sketch of what character is. Which brings us back to the original question. O Lord, who may abide in your tent? Who may dwell on your holy hill? Now, it's not entirely clear where this is. It takes us to two different physical locations. The first is the tabernacle, the traveling tent in which the Ark of the Covenant was carried in the wilderness after the exodus from Egypt. And the second is probably Mount Zion, located in Jerusalem. or it could be the temple, also in Jerusalem. But really, it's not about a literal place. It's about who can approach God. It reminds us that approaching our God is always a bit of a risky affair. Don't get me wrong, God's not going to zap us. In fact, Scripture also reminds us that God invites us to approach Him in faith. But it does mean that the God whom we worship is a God who expects more from us than we often deliver. It reminds us that our God is a holy God, a God not to be trifled with. If Psalm 15 were the last word in our relationship with God, it could be cause for despair. But tomorrow's Psalm, Psalm 36, reminds us that all people may take shelter in the shadow of God's wings. But for now, may God continue to bless you and keep you in all that you do this day and in all the days ahead.